Well, thank you so much, Katie. Happy day, everybody. I hope you can hear me, and if not, please let me know. Thank you again for being at our event. My name is Becky Cruz Lezama, and I am one of the co-chairs for the NOAA Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander Employee Resource Group. And now I'd like to turn it over to my fabulous co-MC, Hans.
Thanks, Becky. Hi, everyone. My name is Hans van Tilburg, and I am the co-chair for the NOAA's Asian ERG. And on behalf of the Asian ERG, and by that I mean all our members and our executive board, I'd like to welcome you to this event. And I really look forward to this, to learning more about, inclusion, diversity, equity, what we do and what other professionals do and different perspectives on the topic. So welcome and thank you for participating in this today. Becky?
Great, thank you so much, Hans. And now I would like to introduce Dr. Gary Matlock, who provided pre-recorded welcoming remarks for today. Dr. Matlock is not able to be with us, but he is with us in spirit. And so I hope you will listen to his amazing welcoming remarks. So before we have that played, I just want to say that Dr. Matlock is our executive sponsor for the NOAA Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander Employee Resource Group. But his other hat, he also serves as the Deputy Assistant Administrator for Science for OAR. And if we can go ahead and play Dr. Matlock's welcoming remarks.
Hi, everyone. I am Gary Matlock, and I'm the OAR Deputy Assistant Administrator for Science, and I'd like to welcome you all on this web broadcast to NOAA's Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. As the executive sponsor for the NOAA Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander Employee Resource Group, I'm thrilled and honored that today we publicly and formally celebrate the contributions that generations of these honored and often underrepresented communities have made to American history, society, and culture. This nation is made more vibrant and richer for the diversity of culture, language, and religion brought by Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. It's this diversity that enhances the whole of America's society and culture, and we are made stronger for it. From Hawaii to the Republic of Palau, NOAA itself is fortunate enough to have offices that are in service of and are served by the diverse communities that make up the spirited tapestry of the Pacific region. I take personal pride in having the honor to recognize this Heritage Month, and I am grateful to the organizers, NOAA's Office of Civil Rights, the respective Asian and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Employee Resource Groups for this opportunity, and to the NOAA Central Library for hosting this event today. These ERGs play a vital role in uplifting and enabling diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility efforts throughout NOAA. Their efforts to shape policies, procedures, and practices affecting employees and to advise management are vital to achieving NOAA's DEIA goals of employment opportunities and achieve the fullest potential that NOAA has to offer. Without these groups, folks like myself in leadership positions miss opportunities to fully support employees and staff members from across so many areas of cultural and personal diversity. My understanding from some recent data collected last year by the Office of Personnel Management is that NOAA has 641 Asian American employees, including 6 in senior executive service roles. In addition, OPM identified a total of 53 Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander employees from a total of 11,883 133 people in the NOAA workforce. I wish the numbers were higher. I wish that our efforts to increase NOAA's diversity was better achieving the desired outcomes that we seek of benefiting from the diversity, from the benefits that are offered by diversity. And I am hopeful that these numbers continue to grow to more fully represent the society in which we operate. I'd also like to take a moment to appreciate Dr. Christi-Anne Castro, the director of the Asian Studies program at the University of Michigan, where she is also an associate dean for faculty development and an associate professor of musicology, for taking her time to address this excellent gathering today. I look forward to hearing her insight and thoughts in commemorating this Heritage Month. Before I end, I'd like to convey just a little bit of a story of my own experience with folks in the Pacific Islands. I came to NOAA back in 1992 in the southwest region of the National Marine Fisheries Service, and had the opportunity through my participation in the Western Pacific Fishery Management Council to travel to Hawaii very routinely throughout about the first 2 years of my engagement there. And one of the benefits that I received from that interaction was the introduction to the topic of traditional or local ecological knowledge, TEK or LEK. It's a topic I had not known before coming to NOAA, but I learned from the people in Hawaii, the members on that council, and others who participated in a variety of meetings in which I was engaged, the benefits that TEK and LEK offered, and the lack of inclusion of those concepts currently at that time in NOAA's management thinking with respect to fisheries. That is changing. NOAA has begun to embrace TEK and LEK and develop ways to incorporate it into the fisheries management arena and beyond. Had it not been for those interactions with the people of Hawaii and Guam and American Samoa in particular, I would never probably have known the benefits that could be offered by the diversity of thinking that TEK brings to us. This topic has personally touched me and continues to do so in my interactions with the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders ERG, and I'm very grateful to Becky Lazama for having taken me under her wing to teach me more about topics that can benefit us in NOAA as a result of the diversity that we now have and are increasing through time. So with that very brief story, thank you again for the opportunity presented to celebrate this Heritage Month with you today. Please take a moment as well to consider and reflect on this year's theme of advancing leadership through collaboration. Thank you again. I hope the rest of the meeting is as productive as the opening has been for me. Thank you.
Wonderful. And I want to assure our audience that I did not draft Dr. Matlock's statement thanking me. So that was a very nice surprise. Thank you. And so with that, I would like to welcome Dr. Castro to the event. And we are sincerely grateful for your time to present at today's NOAA Signature Heritage Month event. And so I will go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Castro.
Great, thank you so much. And Hans, could you nod, because I can only see you. If you can hear me, I haven't tested my microphone. Wonderful. Thank you so much to all of the organizers of today's talk, including the spirit of Dr. Matlock, Conate Simpson, Hans von Tilburg, Richard Grant, Becky Lisama, and Katie Rowley, who all helped with the technical setup, and as well as the ERG folks, Kevin Shu, Tom Jameer, Steve Volz, and the executive committee. For the visually impaired folks here, I am a middle-aged Filipino American woman. I'm wearing a heavy textured necklace, and I smile too much, which I know that Europeans find suspicious. For our empathic listeners, you know who you are. I'll define this later in the talk, but I'm also getting hot flashes today. And you can tell when that's happening because I look kind of distracted, maybe a little more shiny, and I might be sounding a little more irritable. Also about me, I'm an ethnomusicologist, and I've been on faculty for 17.5 years. My research areas all have to do with identity categories, large and small. So, for example, music and nationalism in the Philippines, which has taken on a lot of new salience due to recent events there. Filipino American music, Asian American music, and music as it relates to gender and to sexuality. I also have an abiding interest in music and wellness, which I will also talk about a little bit later, and music and community, which is the subject of my current book project. So obviously, as a professional, I mostly just talk about music, but May is also Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And coming here, you also had a theme that you wanted me to talk about, and that was advancing leadership through collaboration. So I thought, combining music studies with that, it seems to me that the most appropriate topic would be one where I can talk about some music examples that reveal something about leadership and collaboration, with the caveat, of course, that music practice has some really unique aspects that really aren't applicable across the board to all organizations. The goal is not to get you to change your team building activities to be more like a string quartet, but between you and me, if that's the route you're going, I think that you should be the viola player. They aren't divas, they fly under the radar, and you can always get a job. So that's the way to go. Let me get up slide 1 here, and hopefully you can see my slides.
Yes, Christy, this is Katie. We see your slides, but we are not seeing them in presenter view.
Okay, let me just click on that button. I probably should have allowed Katie to simply do the slides. How is that?
I believe we're seeing a different monitor. So if you would like to swap monitors.
You know, Katie, I only have one monitor. So like a good
there we go.
We can have this conversation, and I think it would be great. I'll just keep on talking, and if you could end up showing your screen with the slides, and I'll just tell you when to switch them, that would probably be better.
Wonderful. I will share my slides momentarily.
Yeah, I like it when the computer lies and says something about a monitor that doesn't exist. Okay, so my first slide really is just the question of the day. And that's, what can the study or practice of music teach us about advancing leaders through collaboration? Now, looking to arts and to creative people in general, actually, to join non-music organization ranks, whether they're corporate, whether they're government or NGO, as well as seeing what kinds of collaboration models exist in music practices, it just isn't anything new. There's plenty of writings that you can Google from the last 20 years that talk about how we need to respond to the changing times and a changing world that necessitates changes in corporate culture, and how fields outside of business can help to innovate. But people in the arts also bring products to market. Even those who focus more on music than on business, they benefit from being process oriented. And so I think creativity is all about process, right? And the acts of visioning, of crafting that go into songwriting, learning a new piece, designing a musical program, all of those things are important skills that they can bring to the table. And despite this romantic image that people have of this maverick composer working feverishly alone with unrequited love as his muse, the reality is creative work is a slog, and it is very collaborative. There are networks of performers, marketing people, managers, distributors, and others, all of whom are crucial for the creative acts that we do. The sociologist Howard Becker, in fact, gave it a name many years ago. He called it the art world. And we all talk about it that way because we want to get away from the idea of the artwork as being just an aesthetic object, but rather the process and the things that we do and the way that that helps us to collaborate and network with others. So musicians bring something to the table because they're always relationship building. I mean, goodness, if your job is to follow somebody's musical lead and to blend your voice in harmony with them, to guide a song by playing a constant rhythm on the drums or on your guitar, obviously you have to develop a sensitivity to others and to cultivate how to truly listen to them. So now that we're all kind of warmed up and ready to go, I'll spend a few minutes introducing 3 thematic terms. You know them already: leadership, collaboration, and music. And after that, I'll compare 3 different case studies, 3 different musical examples to see those things in action. Now, the orchestra, as much as we might love that, presents us with an old-fashioned hierarchical model. The jazz ensemble with something that I'm going to present to you as a liquid leadership model. And that doesn't have to do with going out to the pubs at night after work. And a Filipino-American community ensemble, which is a training ground, I think, for advancing leadership through collaboration. And along the way, I'm going to make a claim for music, not only as a force, but in particular, a force that helps shape the social lives of individuals within groups. All right, Katie, slide number 2. So according to Forbes, we know this: leadership is a process of social influence which maximizes the efforts of others towards the achievement of a goal. Great. But for anyone who's been forced to take leadership workshops, or you've read a book on the topic in the hopes of better understanding your sort of nice but also eccentric boss, we know that there's a variety of effective ways to be a good leader. And how one behaves as a leader is often broken down into different styles. So especially like in tech fields, we often hear about things like the visionary leader. But there are styles that we recognize also, like autocratic and bureaucratic. Those are not the favorite ones for talking today. Some of those named styles more readily support collaborative approaches than others. So I like things like coach, servant, or participative leadership. And I can tell you, as a former chair of my department, secretary is also a style of leadership, because that's kind of all that we do as chairs of departments. Whatever style leadership is showcased by that manager, it's going to significantly impact the climate of the organization, of the unit that they're in. So leadership matters a lot. So we learned that the higher you go up that corporate ladder, or business ladder, or NGO ladder, or state ladder, the wider and more diverse your audience, the bigger your portfolio of things to take care of, and the more benefit you gain from utilizing different leadership styles, not just one, but several of them, in order to compromise with whatever situation it is that you find yourself in. And so there are these interesting myths that I got from a book about leadership through collaboration by Kohler and Baxter, and I think you're going to recognize these. The first is the upper levels of hierarchy are occupied by the most experienced and most knowledgeable people in the organization. Myth. Well-conceived programs that provide frequent evaluation of workers by leadership is the best process for promoting continued professional growth. Another myth. And because hierarchical responsibilities promote a view of the big picture, leaders are the logical persons to make most, if not all, of the organization's planning decisions. So they bring up these myths because obviously they have a point. And the point that they're getting at is that these kind of myths work against a collaborative environment. They would prefer to see leadership styles, the authors would, to promote employee empowerment, shared or participative decision-making, and mutual respect. That sounds pretty good, right? But it turns out that these are hard to achieve in practice for all kinds of reasons, not the least of which is a lack of leadership development training. So leadership in general needs to be convinced that there are immediate and long-term benefits in creating an organizational culture of collaboration rather than an organizational culture of autocratic leadership. Slide 3, please, on collaboration. So our next term that we're working with is strong leadership and collaboration. They're not mutually exclusive. It's not to the detriment of one that you would try the other. And that means we have to expand our idea of what leadership looks like. And in academia, we talk about those things about identity all the time. So for instance, if people's only idea of a leadership is a white cis man, then having other leadership people in that position can reshape the model so that the qualities of the person and the way that they appear to others and the way that the experience of leadership is can change by having diverse leaders. So it's important to know what leadership feels like from a team member's point of view. And as with leadership, there's different ways of collaborating. They all fall under this umbrella of working together. But some definitions also add that collaborations involve contributing to a shared objective, which is fine, it's great, as long as we're open to the idea also that the shared objective could be more than just a product or even the end of a single project. In higher education, which is where I've spent my whole life basically, definitions also include learning from one another. The point of collaboration is to learn from one another. And there's a stress on collaboration as a creative process rather than simply a goal-oriented one. And so why should leaders promote collaboration? All kinds of things. Just Google why collaboration is great. Some summaries of those things are collaboration brings people closer together. It opens up new channels for communication, and it boosts morale across the organization. These are what some people call the soft skills. But when we're working and humming along in our most effective way, it's not that we all have to be holding hands and being close together personally, but to work together and communicate better and to go to work with a positive attitude improves the products and projects that we're working on. So working together is one thing, but if listening is a part of collaboration, then we actually also have to learn how to listen. So I added listening to the collaboration part. This is still part of our collaboration definition, and that's our next slide. So there's a guy. His name is Otto Scharmer, and he's from the MIT Sloan School of Management. And he talked about 4 kinds of listening that are pretty important. So Katie, if you could change that slide. The first kind is downloading. That's our default listening. We listen from our own perspective, but if you've heard of that term, the echo chamber, which I'm sure you've had, we tend to want to hear things that confirm what we already thought. Factual listening is a little more open. It's kind of the realm of the scientist, of the researcher, of the explorer, where we're listening for facts. We can have our minds changed, in fact, if those facts bring up another point of view that we say, you know, if I think about it that way, that's possible. Now, getting to the empathic person, which is from the joke at the beginning of my talk, that person has a much deeper experience, and there is a professional way to be an empathic listener. Because when we work together, we're not only doing professional things, we're communicating with one another. Empathic listening means that you're open to the feelings and experience of other people, and that's pretty important in collaborations when there are conflicts, when we need to know about work styles and how to most efficiently and effectively do things. So empathic has a business reason. And finally, generative. Generative is to be so fully present and not only self-aware that you're communicating beyond words. There are gestures. There's an expression on my face that is earnest, if you're, or angry or something like that. Those kinds of things contribute to connections between people and yet go beyond the transcripts of the language that we're using. It can be also in tone and how we speak. It has to do with understanding context. And here's the really interesting thing, is that when you are doing generative listening, the way that you respond to others shows that you are listening to them, and in some way, it gives them a sense that they are being understood and they can understand their own words through you. I know this all sounds a little wooey and self-helpy, but I think that's kind of important because if you think about speaking, or even just like playing a trumpet into the wind because you're the only human left on earth, if there's nobody there to listen, is it music? If there's nobody really listening to you, I could throw these words out, but I'm not quite sure that you're getting the message in the way I intend. Generative listening is a way that you respond to me and you create that kind of meaning because I understand how my words are being understood by you. So it's a pretty deep way of listening, and it's important because it goes to the way that we listen with music. And so I think there's a lesson there. So let's switch the slide, go into music. I don't want to define it. And often we ask our students in the first day of class for non-majors, what is music? It's the worst thing you can do. Everybody sighs and groans because they know it when they hear it and they don't want to have to define it. And I apologize for being pedantic, but you invited a music teacher here. And so I have a lot to say about music. And anyway, I'm faculty. We have all kinds of weaknesses and pedantic is sort of our natural mode. So anyway, forging on. Dictionaries have a very narrow definition of music. We presume that it's vocal or instrumental sound and that it produces something beautiful. That's an aesthetic definition. Harmony also would fall into aesthetics, whether it's the technical harmony of music or the metaphor of harmony between people playing together. More broadly, it's humanly organized sound. Could be also pattern sound. Whatever it is, it might depend on who is defining it. in cultural contexts, we know that even between generations, there's a stereotype, right, of like a grandparent listening to music coming from the bedroom of the child and saying, what is that noise? So somewhere on the spectrum between noise and music, it's going to fall in different places where somebody considers that to be music. And so if you look at the pictures on the slide, you're going to say, what does this have to do with what you're talking about? It's the broader scope. And I wanted to kind of wake up some of our marine biologists in the room by putting pictures of a whale and birds. Are bird songs music? Are whale songs music? I'm going to change the subject because I'm not actually qualified to talk about that at length, but I wanted to bring it up because the things that they have in common with music as humans produce them is that they are communicative. Let's take the slide off now for a second. If it is communicative, and Katie, you could just, yeah, if it is communicative, then it comes naturally that people they go right to the metaphor of music as a language. And the truth is music is not a language, at least not in the denotative sense. It does convey a lot of meaning. And some of that is shared with the way that animals might communicate, but we also communicate quite a bit more about human experience. Its ability, music's ability to carry and to convey all kinds of different meanings, even about fundamental aspects of our life, from affect with an A, like emotion, to memory, to identity. It's the underlying precept of music being inherently social. Music, like language, has to have some agreement between its participants collaborating into it about those meanings so that they can become conventionalized. And all meaning, from language to music, these meanings are derived from social life. Babies don't come into this world understanding how music or language works. It just is something that is taught over time. Obviously a large topic, so let me skip on to why music is quite social. Much like language, in its dynamism, in its changing forms, and its ability to carry multivalent meanings, music is also collaborative. So what we can all agree on, whether we're birds, gibbons, whales, whatever, and chorus one another, is that music is something that we use. It is a resource, like water, like oil, those things, but it's an ineffable resource. It's just not something that we hear. It's just not an object or a recreational thing. The significant addition to all of this is it is a resource that is also a force and not just a vehicle of meaning. So now I've tried to layer on these many ways that we can think about what music is. Like all sound, it's an energy, right? We experience it as sound. We experience it as vibration, sure. But an aesthetic experience of music is pretty complicated. A vehicle of meaning or signification is pretty complicated. And the idea that music would wield influence, could help us to do things if we use it, is also complicated. So for musicologists, one of the most important effects of music, and that's effects with an E, is its relationship to affect with an A. So human beings are moved by music. The human experience of affect is carried quite well by musical sound, we've discovered. And we translate those kinds of things to mood, which is a longer, more stable experience, and emotions, which are cause and effect experiences. Music is almost ubiquitous in sacred rituals, and it's excluded deliberately from sacred rituals because of its positive, negative influence. It's a tool for religious conversion. It's a tool to fuel political energy. It shares messages in social movements and protests. It fortifies conviction to act in important moments of those movements. And it also fuels everyday things like sports, exercise, dance, or for some of you, you'll remember chanting military cadences as you were jogging to keep your energy up and to keep everybody in sync. So music has always been this kind of positive force and powerful force for motivating people. It also helps to improve their wellness. And I'll return to that later in this talk. What's your favorite medium? TikTok, Instagram? I mean, who can resist all of these people working on pieces together in collaborations? You know, I saw something recently about a cat that was making cat vocalizations, and then all of these instrumentalists and singers added their parts to it so that it was layered and it was essentially the cat soloist. It seems so trivial, right? But there are studies that we've read that talk about the active nature of music participation in TikTok changing the music industry and changing our conception of music from passive listening, as we may have done, say, 50 years ago. The radio comes on, whatever plays, we passively listen to it. You could dance too, but the idea is that you don't participate. TikTok, there is so much participation because people have the tools at hand to put their ideas and creative work into it without having to have the same technical skills that it's already required to be in music. So we really see a redefinition of our world and a redefinition of what collaboration means in that musical world. So it doesn't matter what that genre of music is, whether it's popular music, classical music, K-pop. It could be a collaboration like Stop the Hatred that MC Jin and Wyclef Jean did to talk about anti-Asian hate. All of these are collaborations about music, and they tell us just a small portion of the millions of untold stories about how people are using it. So let's go quickly to our case studies. The first one that I want to talk about with collaboration, leadership in music is the orchestra. So Katie, do you want to pop that slide up? This is one of the most obvious examples. People talk about it all the time. The thing about orchestras is they seem like a really great musical organization because they produce these fantastic works of art that some people say are transcendent experience and so forth. But there are some problems with it. The leadership in orchestras are extremely hierarchical. There is an autocratic leadership model that is given to the conductor, who is also the music director. There is the idea of a kind of meritocracy there where the best musicians win out. And yet in practice, it turns out that like many things in society, our structures are set up right from the K through 12 level, right from elementary school, to make it very difficult for people to just catch up and follow the same kind of training example that people with more privilege, with more resources, with more income, with access to the right camps, schools, and teachers. So that the meritocracy is not proven by having blind auditions. The meritocracy is created by a system that is not a meritocracy at its base. So there's a kind of large issue there. And you don't have to take my word for it. When you want to go down the Google rabbit hole, just look up, are orchestra people happy? And you'll find many, many articles where in fact they're really quite unhappy. Music in general is a very difficult field to be in, especially here, because it's low wages, it can be very stressful. The orchestra exacerbates that by creating a work environment that is not collaborative, but where the person next to you, on either side, behind and in front of you, are constantly in competition with you. Because the way that even the chairs are set up where you sit in the orchestra and the role that you play, all of those have to do with you proving yourself every day and through auditions. And so there's a lot of stress. Most people don't get paid that much money. There's a huge amount of bureaucracy. And the way that leadership works, individuals within this team don't feel like they have the freedom to express themselves or the freedom to in some way use their specialization to make their own lives better. They seem to be working like cogs in a machine, which has led to a number of them being unionized. So that's the first kind of leadership and collaboration that, although they produce something beautiful, it's arguable about whether that is a model anyone else would want to follow. It may be that it is so old-fashioned we want to move on to something else. So swipe, next slide. The next one I want to talk about is the jazz ensemble model. And I'm comparing this not because all jazz players are better, not because or happier, not because the genre of music is better than classical, it's just a different genre. But these kind of metaphors that people use where the orchestra is an authoritarian state also lend themselves to the same kinds of metaphors where a small jazz ensemble is a kind of a democracy. It's a place where more people have a voice to say something and where leadership changes hands over time. And we'll talk about that in the next slide. For now, we're talking about smaller jazz ensembles, and smaller groups of music do lend themselves to more creative forms of collaboration and leadership because it's just easier to manage them. But the characteristic features of the music itself are the things that make those metaphors of collaboration and leadership possible. That is, small jazz ensembles feast on the idea of soloing, which is a kind of leadership. They use improvisation to a huge extent, and improvisation is creativity in the moment, right? But improvising is also when you're out in the field and something breaks and you don't have the material to fix it, you problem solve right there because it has to happen in that moment. And so improvisation in the moment for music is composition in the moment. It's the chance to problem solve a musical problem and to take your audience and your colleagues somewhere as the music is occurring in time. And the other musical feature that lends itself to the metaphors is music conversations, and that's where generative listening comes in. If you want, you could have a group where the trumpet player solos for 10 minutes, gets tired of the monologue, and then the bass player takes over. But in reality, the etiquette of the music and the way that these relationships in music work mean that the trumpet player is generating ideas, and that bass player is listening to those ideas. Because when she starts to play her solo after the trumpet player, she gives musical cues that tell the trumpet player and the audience that she was listening, right? That she is responding to a pattern that was produced and then working it through in her own in-the-moment composition to respond and generate in a way that tells the trumpet player, I was listening, I liked this particular idea that you used, and I'm going to sing it back to you in kind of my own way. And for educated audience listeners, and by educated, I just mean people who've listened to more than one jazz piece and are kind of listening for those patterns. It can be rewarding as a listening experience to see that and to hear that interaction between them. So it's kind of a really exciting way to think about those metaphors, really in a very idealized sense. All right, let's get that slide off and have no slides. In these groups, it's important that people and musicians know that conversation is the key to success, that collaborative music making is a process that involves generative listening, because the best of those solos will unfold over time when that happens. And that means that everybody is listening to one another, so that we come up with these words that people use, like, have you heard, that's a tight group, the group is so tight. I know that there's a kind of a modern lingo that the Gen Zs are using, or maybe even millennials, for tight. But in this case, tight in music means everybody's in sync, they're together. And that's only possible through this intuitive sense. You're hearing everyone and you're not going to play a part for them. You're going to play right in time, in sync. And there's a real special feeling that comes from that. There's a connection that happens to people who are playing when they're in sync with other people musically. The music creates the social bond, or the social feeling. Okay, now how does leadership work in a place that is so collaborative? Katie, I'm going to ask you to throw that next slide up. Liquid leadership is a term that I am I'm citing from Gornall and Bickerton. They were writing about jazz being flexible, nimble, and context sensitive. And I'm not going to talk all about the things that they did, but to summarize, liquid leadership is one where there is a security amongst the people and a sense of trust amongst the people in the ensemble. And they share leadership through soloing, right? That's the leading of the music. They share leadership in terms of the process and design of the program that they're going to play. They share leadership when they talk to other members of other groups to have them come and collaborate with them, especially if that other musician has a higher profile than them. Suddenly, when they join, when they do their cameo with the group, they become a kind of a leader because of their status outside of their group. So liquid leadership is something that just simply doesn't happen in orchestra. The structure doesn't support that. But liquid leadership allows people to have a say in the product, to have a say in the process, to feel collaborative, but also to do something really interesting, and that's to share the sense of leadership and have training in that musical ground that isn't available in orchestra, that simply can't happen due to the context of the music making itself. So music creates a context for understanding collaboration and leadership in a particular way. All right, great. Let's take that slide off for a second. I'm going to do a little bit of a summary here so that we can get to these affirmations. And that is, what if we reposition the point of collaboration far away from that separate shared goal? What if we say something a little bit wacky, like the benefits of collaboration are collaboration itself? That collaboration and good interpersonal relationships give us some benefits, like positive sociality, and that those benefits in your organization will trickle up and they will trickle down. We could argue that the larger goals can more easily be achieved and sustainability of good practices is possible because the ability to collaborate is learned and it has to be practiced. A commitment to collaboration in your organization could be foundational for a team that can solve all kinds of problems, especially ones that come up on the fly, can dream up creative products that change the market, even as they arise. Those in more idealistic professions, you know, like music, we sort of present these things as if they're easy to do. I know that they're not, but that's the whole point in my coming here today, is to kind of give an option and to look in that direction. And hopefully you can apply any of these things or some of these things or just one of these things to some of your practices. Now, it occurs to me I'm way too idealistic and that if you can't apply any of those, I should give you some musical affirmations so that when you leave, you remember like one or two things. So I'm going to do a short digression because it has to do with the nature of music and how important I think it is to you as a person. So here's my digression. All of these things about collaboration do not imply that only people who are professional musicians can do music. You can also do music. There are benefits to you personally. You don't have to be a good musician to do it. As a hobby, it can provide benefits to you beyond that. The idea of passive listening that I brought up before, nowadays, we don't see that as being so passive anymore. It's not a negative way of using music. To listen to music can have important benefits. There are lots of studies out there and surveys out there. Some of the most recent ones have to do with COVID and the way that people have used music, or the way that people, past tense, used COVID during quarantine in order to help their mental health, in order to have a sense of wellness. And here's a really interesting one. Some people describe using music as a substitute for social interaction. So there is a way in which listening to music, not just playing it, has benefits to us as human beings. So then the third thing I wanted to give as an affirmation to you is that you don't have to listen to transcendent music. You don't have to listen to, Mozart or Beethoven, who happen to be the most popular classical musicians, composers who are heard all the time. You can listen to whatever kind of music you like, even if you think it's embarrassing, even if you're like, I don't want to tell anybody because I'm the serious military general and Taylor Swift is my favorite. If that music brings something good to you, then you can use that music for your own wellness. And that brings us to, I'm just going to go really quickly over slide number 10, which is music as a technology of self. Music can help you, those affirmations are telling us, music can help you to do things like emotionally self-regulate. That was very common during COVID, but it can happen during any time. It is a part of your own self-care. You cannot be a leader, you cannot be a good member of a team if you also do not take care of yourself. This is something you also hear all the time. But it is also a self-expression. This is a little complicated to talk about, so I'm just going to summarize it this way. If you don't know yourself, if you feel like you are one Asian American in a million people in a suburb where you're growing up and you never see anyone who looks like you, sometimes the ability to express who you are through that music, the way that you see yourselves, and then through that music, because when you talk about that music, it is the way other people will see you. That can have positive also effects on you as a person. So K-pop, people have done studies that there are, for instance, LGBTQ folks, Asian American folks, who listen to K-pop and are fans, part of the fandom of K-pop, because that expression of the K-pop, even though they're not Korean, right? You could be Chinese American, Filipino American, whatever. The expression of what K-pop is a kind of tie that they're making to an identity feature of themselves that they're not seeing around them. So music as a technology of self is a resource that people can use to make their lives better. Next slide. If we expand that, then we also know that music as a technology can make social life better. There's a million examples of this in social gatherings, the way that we use music to forge group ties in religious settings, in political settings, in nationalistic settings. It is rousing. Even if you aren't a fan of our national anthem, and this is not a political statement, I just mean as a piece of music because it's really hard to sing very high. There is something about going to a ballpark, having everybody get up and sing it, which makes tingles happen in your arm. And that doesn't have to do with even liking the song. It has to do with communal singing where everybody is sharing that moment, whatever ideas you have about the country and the national anthem and so forth. Something happens there in the same way that it happens in choir. Okay, next slide. That brings us to my last example. If we believe, let's say 70% of the things that I just talked about here, that there's a resource, technology, force, use, and that not the best, most artistic music is also the best music in the world, then I'm going to present a very small argument, a short argument here that community music ensembles may in fact be some of the most excellent breeding grounds for leadership through collaboration that we can come up with. The Filipino Rendalia, I'm not going to get into too much about what it is since we don't have time, but it is a plucked string ensemble The European instruments came to the Philippines during Spanish colonization, and then they localized it. The sound itself, the timbre of the instruments and the way that they're played means so much to Filipinos from the Philippines that parents who started a Filipino school called Iskwelahang Filipino in Boston, they thought to themselves, if my kids could play that music also, if there is something about the sound of the instruments and the language that they sing when there are songs with them, maybe it would help them to understand something more about where I came from. So they started this community music ensemble, and it plays all different kinds of things. And it's a great example of this because the group itself is not producing music that you would want to put on top 40 radio. The product is perhaps the least important thing of what they do. It is actually the process of being together, playing music together, and bonding through rehearsals, musical tours, and performances that matter. The group is intergenerational. You can see from the picture there, actually. Kids are playing with their parents, and so they're bonding with them in a way that is different than their home group. And the group also develops leadership skills along the way because the leaders of the group arise from the group itself. The kids grow up, become teenagers, and those in high school teach the younger kids who are learning how to play. So there's an expectation, even if the smaller kids can't articulate it, that, hey, someday I could be teaching this thing too. So they're watching. They may not be explicitly learning how to be leaders, but they're watching along the way how that leadership develops with the confidence knowing that that could be them, that it's not out of reach. And once they become leadership positions in high school, those kids teach younger kids and they get to practice being leaders before they even get to the college and university setting where we sort of think that leadership skills will develop more. So the argument I make with this third ensemble is the kind of training ground where collaboration leads to leadership means that the product of music is less important than the process of learning and playing that music together. So I think I'm actually out of time. I might even be over time with this. So I'm going to pop off that slide and just end today with a conclusion that music is the stated goal for all of these things, but whether you look at these different examples and see a great product versus the way that that music is done, it may be that the most generative, creative, and leadership-oriented collaborative music ensemble is in the most modest and humble example. It really just depends where you're looking for it. So I'll stop here. I could obviously talk about music for hours and hours. I hope this was enough to pique your interests, and I would be happy to answer some questions. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much, Dr. Castro. That's very interesting. Thank you for bringing that focus on collaboration and leadership and informed listening via the examples from music, but bringing that content at a level that has lessons for us in our agency and what we do in marine science and resource management. That's no small feat, by the way, so thank you for doing that. And I would encourage our listeners to enter their questions in the Q&A column, and we will be monitoring that. But you know, you've really addressed the collaboration and leadership in a fascinating way. I wanted to change focus just a little bit while we begin to monitor the Q&A questions, and ask you something in your role as department chair and efforts to diversify our labor force, hiring practices. Is there success there? Because we're very focused on that in our agency. And you know, there can be internal guidance at different levels, but I'm wondering, from your perspective in academia, is there success there? Are there ways that you can do that could apply more generally to creating diversity in the workplace?
Yeah, thank you for that question. You know, academia has been suffused with messages of DEI, but it has seemed to me that for years and years, no matter how much messaging we get, it doesn't actually change anything, right? There's a superficial layer, like oil on water. Sorry, I just I just traumatized somebody by saying like oil on water because, you know, NOAA. But anyway, it's a layer that sits on top and doesn't really get to the bottom of things. And one of the things that I've seen recently that was really helpful is to get to the nitty-gritty of things like process. Now, process is super boring for people, but process can help us to get to ideological goals, because one of the things that we did is, you know, academia has this terrible thing about fit. right? So they talk about collegiality a lot, and collegiality for a long time was just another way of describing, like, I get along with people who are just like me. And so even though I'm not explicitly trying to exclude others, in the search process, I tend to feel more comfortable and respect people who are like me. So in process, we did a kind of a simple but important thing is we changed our, first of all, we required DEI training for everybody serving on a search committee. The second thing is we changed the required forms that people have to fill out to change culture fit, which is how are they going to fit into this environment? Are they going to work as a team member? We changed that to culture add. What do they bring to the table that's different? And that allowed us to think about things in a different way, because you have to remember Michigan is a no affirmative action state, right? So it's a place where we have to think about diversity in very creative and different ways. We required people to actually fill out those forms, put in a number rating and a justification in language. And that got rid of that whole sort of faculty realm of, I just didn't feel like they would be a good fit in the department, where you never had to explain yourself, but often that really just meant they made me uncomfortable. Their ideas were different. They weren't like me. So the process of changing and forcing people to really think and articulate why they made certain decisions or judgments, I think has been really helpful in this last round of hiring. We had a hiring freeze, and now we have a lot of people coming on board, and just the results seem to speak for themselves, and that there seems to be a lot of improvement in terms of intellectual diversity and diversity of backgrounds from first generation folks and so forth coming in.
Oh, thank you for that. Becky, we've got a question in the question column.
Oh, you know what? For some reason, I cannot see it, but
okay.
However, yeah, I can't see it. I see it. Thank you. But, Dr. Castro, so as I was listening to you, talk about, you had mentioned, when you did the string quartet, you guys got together, and sometimes it wasn't about the product. And so my office is Office of Legislative and Intergovernmental Affairs. And we really do try to weave in, like say it's someone's birthday, we sing happy birthday. And for my then director's birthday, we had thought we would surprise her with all of us singing, and we changed the lyrics from Windy to Wendy. And I guess we didn't practice well enough, but we all got together and we sang it. And it was like, I used the word horrible, but in a very nice way, because it came off. But like you said, it was the fact that we got together, we tried, and it was a lot of bonding, and it was just so hilarious. I think I even recorded, and I'm banned from ever showing it. But like we're always looking for those ways to connect, like you said, right? And a lot of the times that you can learn, whether it's like the leadership skills. And I didn't really think of that much about leadership, because I always thought, God, I was so bad in practicing violin or whatever music that I am terrible in that. So therefore I'm not, I'm not going to be good in anything. But any suggestions that you could have as far as like this collaboration and using, whether it's music in some sort, like some examples for us to bring into, whether it's like our summits that we're having or our retreats. We've been trying to look for very, very, examples, and with you and your department and focusing on music, something to help us. Again, remember, we are not the best musical, or at least I am. I should say that, because I actually have folks who are. So anything you can suggest for us for our next summit?
Yeah, your story is really funny about the singing. And I think part of what makes it so memorable to you is that all of you are, you said bad, but I'm saying badass. All of you are badass at what you do, right? And so you're pros at all these things, but what you aren't are singers. And so when you start singing like that, it's not just that you're singing in a group, it's that you're actually saying, hey, I'm not great at this, but I'm willing to showcase it. So it's a show of vulnerability in the workplace, which is, I think, not typical. And so that's a kind of a bonding thing. And it's at the heart of, when you have these summits and you have these meetings and they try to do icebreakers. Well, one of those icebreakers is like, let's warm up and talk. But sometimes those icebreakers are about, let's also bring some of those walls down. And we can do that by being a little vulnerable, but in a super low stakes way, right? Like singing bad is not like, I'm going to confess to you that, whatever. So I think that I'm not telling you to sing at your next summit, but,
Yeah.
but I'm saying that that's kind of the effect. One of the things, as faculty, I'm the Associate Dean for Faculty Development. And one of the things that we are trying to use, our school is small compared to what you're talking about, but one of the strategies that we've been using are creating different cohorts, because those affinity areas where people get along, are ways for them to have social relationships with one another that are built outside of the summit, so that when they get to the summit, it's like a reunion of sorts, because they've met them through other things. Some of those are affinity groups, but like they could be like, you know, Asian Americans and whatever. But other of those things that we've created are professional affinity groups. So those in the cohort who are in the first 3 years who haven't been tenured, those in the last 3 years going towards tenure, those who have just been tenured. And so we're just creating these different excuses. They're really excuses, right? To get people to know each other outside of these, outside of their regular work, so that when they do have to work together in a team impromptu, like a committee, or they do have to get together in a summit, they already have a level of comfort because there's like 1 or 2 people there that they've met at other things. So that might work for you. You probably, I'm not as familiar, obviously I'm not familiar at all with your organization and the things you do, but those things have helped us a little bit.
No, that's good. Very good to hear. And okay, I think I do see, I just saw a question pop up.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Castro. I will definitely bring that in. Yeah, I don't think I will be singing. I think I'm paid not to sing or play any instrument. But let me go ahead and turn it over to Hans.
Yeah, well, thank you again, Dr. Castro. It really has been fascinating. And we'd like to just, at this time, just present a very brief information about both of our ERGs and then go to concluding remarks. But really, it's given us a lot to think about today. So if we could have the next slide, Katie. For the Asian ERG, I will say just very briefly, if for folks who are listening and would like to learn more, please contact us. Kelvin Hsu is our chair and I am co-chair, but you can always find us, and we have clerks and you know, we have others on the executive board and about 50 or 60 members now, but you can find us through the Office of Inclusion and Civil Rights, of course, through NOAA, or the No Asian ERG. And we're not just involved with this type of heritage event on this day, but more on events throughout the entire year now. We have a subcommittee on communications and professional development and education and outreach. And we're collaborating with a number of partners in this at the DOC level, or obviously with the Pacific Islander and Native Hawaiian ERG. And we have website and newsletter coming out now. So we're really taking more of an active part in getting the word out and awareness. And Becky, there's a note about the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander ERG. Next slide, please.
Well, great. And so this will be our contact slide, so to speak. I have our names there for the other co-chairs as well, and folks that are in our executive group. And I've already mentioned that Dr. Gary Matlock is our executive sponsor. We have a couple other events that we posted here in the document, although I will say that that June 8th event has been moved, so I will provide some updates as we move along. But I do want to say that from the NHPI ERG, I want to say thank you, Dr. Castro. It has been, I have to tell you, I was getting a lot of G chats, and we're just talking about like, well, what about heavy metal, and what about this, and and so it was great that people were just like, oh my God, I love listening to her. And so I just want to say how appreciative we are to have you speak at this signature event that we do once a year. And so we want to thank the folks who took the time out to listen across of NOAA. And thank you so much, Dr. Castro, for sharing the photos of the bird and the whale. And I'm sure it really caught a lot of people's attention. And thank you, everybody, for spending your time with us and hearing about Dr. Castro. So we'll go ahead and that's the end of our program. Thank you guys so much. Bye. Oh, I'm so sorry. We have our closing remarks. I apologize.
From Richard Grant.
Sorry, I just saw the time and I was like, ooh, sorry, Richard.
No worries. Hello. I know how it is. We're short. So, but good afternoon, and to some of you, good morning. First of all, I just want to take a moment to thank you again, Dr. Castro, for your remarks. Not only were they extremely interesting, but very informative. I know that personally, music for me has always been very important. I'm glad that any music counts, no matter what people say. So Because for me, I mean, it really contains the memories of my life. It's created bonds with some of my closest friends. It automatically stirs emotions in me when I hear certain music and takes me right back to periods of time. So, and I think we do all take it for granted, but music's all around us and impacts us whether we realize it or not. So, truly fascinating discussion. So thank you again. And I, for one, do not know what I would do without a world without music. So. I also think the focus on collaboration, particularly the theme of this year's observance, is especially an important concept. When I first started in the diversity inclusion field, that was one of the first things we were taught. There was about 5 kind of core concepts that they felt related to inclusion, and one of them was collaboration. We even had this mantra: "We are smarter together." When we come together collectively through collaboration, we have greater opportunities to maximize our successes in whatever endeavor we undertake. So again, I want to thank you again. We certainly appreciate you taking the time to join us today. It was really great. I think a lot of people feel uplifted. For me, I just want to emphasize, I can't state how much I really enjoy these events. Not always do I always learn something, and I'm someone who really appreciates and loves learning, but they really have reaffirmed for me why I chose to do what I do. Open myself up to learning about another culture allows me not only to see the beauty in that culture, but also allows me to see the commonalities that we all share. And now at the end of the day, we are all worthy and deserving of dignity, respect, and equality. Unfortunately, we're kind of at a strange point in our nation's history. As far as we have come in terms of race, there are still some in this country who would like to return us to a less intolerant past. I am personally disturbed by the rising level of hate as well as violence in our country against persons from underrepresented groups. It seems like every day our news is filled with these unsettling stories revolving around race and racial issues. Yet when I attend events such as this and I open myself up to new experiences, I immerse myself in the beauty of another culture, especially one as rich and diverse as we find within our Asian and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities. It really fills me with a determination and stiffens my resolve that we must not go backward, but we must forge ahead and really create a new reality built on acceptance and tolerance. The truth of the matter is this country has always been one that has been a mix of cultures. It is a country of immigrants. So we need to stop distinguishing people and assigning them value because of the color of their skins. We really need to appreciate people for who they are and continue to come to our country, who come here and do so not to change it, but really to come here for the ideals in which it was founded, and the promises it brings: freedom, equality, rights, liberty, opportunity, and democracy. They continue to come here. They come here to strengthen our country, to uphold these ideals and not destroy it. And we need to keep that in mind. These individuals have defended our country, our beliefs. Some have even, made the ultimate sacrifice and gave their lives for it. So I think that what we need to do is, instead of shunning people and disrespecting them because they do not fit the mold of what some people think Americans are, which poses actually an interesting question: what really does an American look like anyway? Right? I think that some people have a distorted view, but being American should not be about skin tones, but about the ideals on which this country was founded, and we should openly embrace anyone who chooses to live here by these ideals. So with that, I would like to personally thank everyone who made this event happen today, including members of the planning committees for the Asian and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander ERGs, Kelvin Zhu and Hans von Tilburg, chairs of the Asian ERG, as well as Becky Cruz-Lazama and Bernadita Anolacion. I think I might have mispronounced her name, but please forgive me, Bernadita, as well as Dr. Matlock, the executive sponsor for the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander ERG, for providing his opening remarks. Katie Rowley from the NOAA Central Library for providing the platform for today's event and handling the technical aspects of today's presentation. Laurel Lamb and Sue Kim for creating the employee slideshow. Our interpreter today, Ms. Crystal Butler, thank you very much. And finally, Tanisha Simpson, the Special Emphasis Program Manager for both the Asian ERG and the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander ERG. And last but not least, I do want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to come join us today. It's our goal at NOAA to create an inclusive environment where we not only appreciate diversity, but we openly embrace it. And in order for us to reach that goal, we must collectively raise our cultural awareness and increase our cultural competencies. By participating in such events as today, it's one way where we can do that, right? So I continue to encourage you to participate in these events, as well as take some time on your own to explore and learn about another culture. I think you'll not only learn something new, you will see that for all our apparent differences, We really all are more alike than we can be seen on the surface. So thank you all again. Great job, everyone. I really appreciate it and really enjoyed today's event. So thank you and take care.